Welcome to the Holistic Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Keisha Blair, wife, mother of 3, author of Holistic Wealth, and founder of the Institute on Holistic Wealth. The show will showcase various experts in the key pillars of holistic wealth. Each week, we deliver the best information on how to become holistically wealthy and live your best life. Today, I have a very, very special guest with me. It's Kristina Shea. And Kristina has an amazing story of triumphing over illness. She's been widowed twice, suffered from corporate burnout, job loss to creating her company, BlueSkys Life. And so, Kristina, I'm so happy to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. I'm very honored to be on your podcast, and a total delight to have a conversation in the middle of the day and take me away from the regular day-to-day work. So it's a nice break, and I look forward to our dialogue and conversation.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And you have an amazing story, just amazing. I mean, Kristina, I've been widowed once, but you've been widowed twice. Not only that, but you suffered burnout and actually collapsed in the Toronto district when you were in your corporate life. And so I'll leave it up to you to start with telling us a bit about your journey. I'm so interested to hear how it all got started, your widowhood. And I don't know if your illness preceded it, but I'll leave you to tell us how it all unraveled.
Yes, it's hard to kind of put this in, it's kind of just in my life story, I guess, in a concise, short synopsis, but I will do my best. I do often compare it as a joke, because sometimes you have to take things a little bit with some humor, that I have lived a bit of a Netflix miniseries life. But yes, I have been widowed twice. So I was married when I was very young. I came from a home that, to be honest, I mean, my mom doesn't watch or listen to these things, but so I'm not going to, hold back, but it was a really dysfunctional home. And so I married when I was young at 21 years old. I really just wanted to escape and start a new life. He was my high school sweetheart. He didn't go, he was a bit older than I, but I met him when he was 15. So we both had a love for riding motorcycles. So we did that for quite a few years. I mean, that was more his passion than mine. But one day he was actually hit by a truck, and I was 24 years old. My whole identity was entwined with this man because, I'd basically grown up with him. He was 4 years older than I. But it was just like one day your whole life just changes in a second, as you can imagine. And it was just so sudden and traumatic. And I was actually working overtime on a Sunday. And, I had this sixth sense that something was wrong. It was so bizarre. But I won't get into the gory details, but it was quite traumatic, as you can imagine. And I had to identify in the hospital. And at 24 years old, I mean, I look at my daughter, she's barely, she just turned 20. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know how I got through all that. But anyway, basically I had to move out of our home. It was very challenging on emotionally, mentally, and financially too. And then, I met, and I was working as a graphic designer at the time, actually, for a lot of corporate. That's where my career started, working with banks and so on. And that day, I worked a little bit longer at that position, and I had a really great job. I loved it. And I managed 10 people at the time. For a young girl, that was, or a young woman, that was quite a feat. So I was already kind of climbing that ladder in a small agency. Mm-hmm. And working too much still. But anyway, so I then moved on and, was making my life. I'd bought a small little home, and I was working towards creating a new future. And I met my next husband, who I met at work. And he was also the father of my lovely daughter, Chloe. But, he had his own challenges too. I don't usually talk too much about it, but, he had addictions and his own demons, let's just say that. So I had a lot of, issues there as well. So after 9 years of marriage, we did separate, but we became very, very good friends. And actually our relationship was much, much better. And so we were really close. He still came over holidays. He was here at the house all the time. He was just, he was still in our family. He was still my husband. It's just, he was getting a lot better actually, but he died suddenly of a heart attack. And it was really due probably to alcoholism and his cigarette habit, which he smoked about 1 to 2 packs a day. So, and he was doing so much better, but, sometimes these things just catch up, and I still love him very, very much. And I miss him. I don't want to get all emotional. And, and it was the worst moment, was really telling my daughter. That'd be the worst moment in my entire life, having to tell my daughter that her father was no longer here.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, it was very unfortunate. He was very young. He was like 57 years old.
Yeah.
And so it was unexpected. He was happier. He was doing much better. And, things were good. So it was just, it was devastating. But at the same time, because we were living separately, I was financially supporting, with the issues he had, I was supporting my daughter. I was supporting our life. Like he didn't have to really contribute that way, but he was a wonderful father in the best way that he could be. So I will say that. But, so what I was doing in the behind the scenes is I was trying to make a stable home for my daughter financially and security and all the stuff that we didn't have. And so I was working like, ridiculous hours in the financial district. And, probably 60 to 80 hours was average. And, dropping my daughter off at daycare in the early wee hours, 6 a.m., and jumping, running, literally in my high heels and running to catch that train to get downtown Toronto. And I did this for years and exhausted. But one day, and I was feeling really unwell for months, and I was suffering from migraines. So just one day I was I was meeting a friend down in the lunch court, which is a big area. And I remember thinking, I was holding on to the escalator rail thinking, I don't think I can stand up, and how am I going to make it? I'm thinking, all I'm thinking is I want to have a good time. I want to meet this friend that I haven't seen in quite a while. And I'm thinking, I feel like I'm going to fall over. And literally just a few steps after the escalator, I literally collapsed. I don't have much memory of that.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was quite frightening because I actually lost my vision at that time. When I woke up, I couldn't see. So I was rushed to the hospital, ambulance. I don't really remember any of that, except that I woke up and they were doing a myriad of tests and, I couldn't see. So I started panicking.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So you're literally in the dark. You don't know what's going on. Right. And not just metaphorically, I obviously couldn't see. So that actually did subside. So within 24 hours, I was able to see again, but it was quite scary.
Yeah, you must have been relieved. I mean, to be in darkness and not know what's going on, that must have been so scary.
It was terrifying, I'll be honest. And I'm a very visual person because, my background is graphics and design and, anybody wouldn't want to lose their sight, but it was like, I didn't know how I would even survive after that, if that was going to be the future. But, you have to get through things. So they did MRIs and they did all these myriad of tests, as I said. And first they diagnosed, the first time when I was brought into the doctor's office, they told me that, I was just thinking, they're going to tell me it was a migraine, it was stress, like that regular stuff. I'm like, I don't, whatever, I got stuff to do. Right. So, but no, she just sat me down. First, they told me that I had brain cancer because they read the scans incorrectly. So I thought, yeah. So I walked out of there thinking, what? And again, I was thinking, who's going to look after my, so all I ever thought about who's going to look after my daughter because she was very young. But then they did re-diagnose it as being a brain cyst. So it's, it was a pineal cyst. However, it was causing severe issues and pressure. So it wasn't, some cysts can be not, don't interfere with your life, but this one had been and still continues to this day because I didn't choose to have surgery because they had told me that there was a risk of losing my eyesight. And I, at the time, decided not to do that. And I also was running my own consulting firm on top of my day job. So I decided to, just live. I tried to reduce my stress. I was trying to live holistically, live well, reduce my stress, of course, so less hours and so on. And I discovered alternative ways to deal with my pain because originally what I was doing was taking a myriad of painkillers in between this, which ruins your intestinal system. And also you become addicted to these things. Yeah. So then I became addicted to painkillers.
And how did you know you were addicted? Were you taking like a certain amount at the time and your doctor said, no, that's a bit too much? And what was that amount? Like how much is considered to be like, yes, you're addicted to painkillers?
Well, I mean, I was taking opioids. I was taking freeze like candy. Like I would take them every hour.
Okay.
So, and then your body just decides that it needs it. And I would get anxiety because I would be worried, I'm like, how am I going to get to this meeting? I got to pop a pill. I got to pop another one. You just got to make it through the day. And, and then your body just starts needing it. It's normal. And I realized this was really, really unhealthy, of course. And I'm mostly concerned about my relationship with my daughter too, because obviously I was bringing a lot of my angst and issues home. And I hate to say this, I wasn't being probably the ideal mother. I was doing my best, but to me, the best wasn't enough. So I decided I had to do something about it. I had no idea what, but so one of my girlfriends, she had come over to help me look after my daughter. Because I had this one day where I just couldn't function. I had to go lie in the dark, the migraine. The migraine, if you've ever experienced it,
Yes.
Yeah.
I have them.
Yes. I would love to know how you deal with them. I mean, I still deal with them, but since I started taking what we'll talk about, it's reduced and my need to use them. So I had this whole basically put pills and stuff all over my bedside table. And she came over. She goes, "It's time. You need to change. You need to do something different." I've kind of struggled through my health for various different side effects because of what I had put my body through. And corporate burnout, it's real.
Mm-hmm.
And burnout, not just corporate, burnout of any nature. When you're pushing your body to the extremes, like I was not sleeping. And I used to say I would sleep when I die. And then
oh my gosh.
I said, I will die if I don't sleep. And this was a reality. So sleep is where you recover. And I was getting about 3 hours of sleep, probably for, at least 10 years.
Wow.
And I was also going to school because I was so I was taking full-time schooling and I was working full-time, plus running a consulting firm on the side. And I was teaching fitness and dance. Like it doesn't make, and I was raising a daughter. So reality there's not enough time in the day, even if I didn't sleep ever. So It just got too much. And then later on, I ended up working for, I changed my life and then I kind of got drawn back into this life again. And that's what's hard is people were always asking me to come back and work in a corporate role. And it's not that I don't like that and don't enjoy it, but I ended up being working for a life science company. And again, I was kind of gone through all that. And then COVID hit and I was kind of going through that cycle and I was thinking, I have to get off this cycle and I'm not happy. And so I think, and I've already been, incorporating holistic living into my life, like, meditation, yoga, eating well. So I always joke, it's not about, holistic or any kind of wellness. It's not just about going to yoga class or drinking from your Lululemon or drinking from your Swell bottle and wearing your Lululemons. It's a way of life. Mm-hmm. So I actually, because I got laid off, I decided, what, this is the catalyst. This is it. I'm going to now just pivot and work towards my passion project, which is my new business endeavor, which is BlueSkys.
I'm so intrigued with the topic of burnout. And I want to ask you, so listeners know, at what point do you know for sure you're at the point of burnout? Like without a doubt, you know what I mean? How can listeners know that they're at that point so they need to take action?
Yes, I can totally identify. This is from my personal experience. So I'm not, a doctor or a therapist, but I think if you are, you're unfulfilled, you're unhappy, you're dreading going to work. And sometimes you're not really sure, it's subconscious. If you're not sleeping because you're worrying about work all the time, and work is, it could be not really corporate, but it could be anything where whatever those, what's your day to day, whatever those things are, if they're encompassing all your thoughts, if you're coming home irritable all the time, if you can't find joy in the small things, or even going to family functions, you feel like, oh, I don't have time to do those things. Or all you're doing when you do get there is thinking about work. It's where there's absolutely no fulfillment, no joy. It becomes that you're just thoroughly exhausted. Like my body would feel like I was hit by a truck. Like it was, I'd be so exhausted. And I just couldn't, even seeing friends, I was just tired. I was just tired all the time. And, all I could talk about was work usually, because that's what was my whole life at that time. And I think a portion of that, why I was doing that, when I look back, I've been, analyzing and looking back to my life, I was dealing with so much trauma because of the loss of my husband. I was purposely, and still to this day, I have to kind of try to find that balance. I would totally put myself all in because I didn't want to deal with the pain. I didn't want to deal or recognize it, or I just wanted to keep moving so I didn't have to think about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that kind of emotional pain and the grief is so deep. I've experienced it and I cannot imagine experiencing it twice. But for most women, whether we like it or not, it's the path that we're going to be on, whether it happens earlier or later. I mean, most women, 80% of women will outlive their husbands at some point. So Kristina, in terms of even how you began to deal with that when you became a single mom, I was in your shoes when I became a single mom too, and juggling a corporate career right? And juggling grief and everything. And your body's feeling like it's been hit by a truck. It's feeling numb for months and months and months.
Mm-hmm.
How did you cope with even that aspect, in addition to burnout?
My first husband, I remember lying on the grass and, I was just overcome with grief. Like I didn't go anywhere. I didn't get up. I was so depressed. But I remember just looking at the line it was spring, and I was looking at the blue skies and the clouds. And I thought, the blue skies were just so beautiful. It was optimistic. It was hopeful. And it was like that small moment of joy where I was like, the world is still wonderful. Life is wonderful. This planet is wonderful. And even though I could just tune it out for a second, and it gave me hope. And even though the storm clouds come in and they roll in, they will pass and the blue skies will reappear. So I was finding small moments of joy, and I was reconnecting, like people say, smell the roses, right? Like I would pour myself into gardening, or, saying just hello, those small connectivity moments that you would have with people. But it was very, very, very difficult to rebuild. And for me, because I was so young at the time, I was trying to find myself, because I didn't know my identity, because it was so entwined with being a wife.
Yes.
Yeah. So each experience was very different because there were different points in my life, but I would try to find these, beautiful moments, and especially in nature. And I would like to think that he was there with me, enjoying them. And so even when I would travel, because I do love traveling, I did that a little bit later in life, but I would kind of pretend, or I wouldn't say pretend, I would visualize him being there with me, enjoying those moments. And it made me enjoy those small moments. People get hung up on fancy houses and cars and all that. But really, at the end of the day, it's the small moments that you remember. It's the small moments you remember interacting with your husband or your loved ones that are gone. You don't necessarily remember that, you bought this fancy house. You remember that, you had a wonderful meal and you took this lovely romantic walk and you kissed and things like that. They're very small but meaningful moments. And I found nature was really healing. Going to the beach and the water was very cathartic. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's what it was. The second time was a different sort of scenario because my focus was on my daughter.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that. And of course, I can totally relate because I found healing in nature too, and wellness and, like extreme self-care. I mean, after my husband died, I took a 1-year sabbatical to Jamaica, and it was a lot of healing through wellness, eating well, meditation, as you mentioned, spending time in nature and all that good stuff, that holistic living, which is why I'm so drawn to your story too, because, during COVID-19, so many people are dealing with trauma and, are looking for ways to heal and to get over, this period and just on a day-to-day basis, just practical things, Kristina, that they can do. And so you made a really good point earlier about our identities are so wrapped up in our loved ones from a very young age. And I mean, you got married at 21, your first marriage, right? So I can imagine for you, everything was wrapped up there. And so in my book, Holistic Wealth, I spoke about that everyone should have their own financial identity, and especially for women. And I know you do a lot of work with gender equality too, which I want to get into as well. But I just want to, just because you made that point about your identity being wrapped up in someone else, and that happens to so many women, especially when we first get married, and most of us get married, in our 20s and our early 20s. I did too. And so I wanted to ask you about the results of your quiz based on that personal financial identity framework that I developed, and just to share your results and, your experience and how you've managed to, how this philosophy or how this identity has been shaped over the years. Put it that way. I'd be interested in those insights.
It's an interesting way I've never really thought about it like that. So my results, which I was kind of surprised because I've always been building security and for my daughter in particular, because I never felt like I had security, because primarily, well, maybe from my upbringing when I was young, but also losing people. So, but I realized it would never make me happy because I didn't like the status quo. I always felt like I was meant to do more than, I don't know, sell financial plans for a big bank, and they don't care about the actual people behind it. Like I like what I love about what you're doing is that connectivity between, the individuals and really understanding where they want to go and how they want their life to be. They don't really get that, going to your banker necessarily. But for me, I was surprised by the result because it did say I was a risk taker. And I've had people say that before. And I think when I remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. Because I mean, I kind of felt like I was always on the fence about that but I think being on the fence is not always a good thing either, but also one way is not good either, risk wise. But I think people are so afraid of taking risks, and I'm not as much, because I feel like we have one life to live. And, after losing, some significant loss, like when my second husband passed away, I also lost my father in the same year.
Oh, no.
Yes. I mean, there's a whole story in that whole year, 2016. I remember it, but people are like, they want to forget about 2020, but here we are still in 2021 in the pandemic. But I think, people have experienced so much loss during the pandemic as well, job loss, financial loss, loved ones, and I think because of their experiences, I hope, I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but I hope they bring empathy and kindness and a lot of things that people didn't have or weren't, maybe giving out freely before. So for example, for me in 2016, going through such extreme loss, because I lost my husband, I was dealing with my daughter, because she was emotionally, obviously traumatized. I was dealing with a very unsympathetic corporation that I was working for. Absolutely horrible experience. I couldn't even wish that on my worst enemy, to be quite frank.
Oh, no.
Then on top of that, my father died. And, and I had I actually had a personal traumatic experience in that year as well. So it was like the year from, I'm religious. I don't want to say the year from hell, but it really was. And so, and when you're going through all these things, I mean, it feels like the rest of the world. And it's not that they don't care. It felt like that because, you're the only one experiencing it, at least that you're aware of at that moment in that time. And what 2020 has, I think, opened people's eyes is because they're all going in it. We're all in this together, quote unquote, right? But it doesn't mean that people aren't going through their own individual trials and tribulations. Some people are experiencing, the loss in 2020 very differently than others. But I think it's given people an insight and hopefully to what people can, be going through, more empathy and kindness. And I always say this, I would love to see kindness and empathy be the new contagion. Hopefully this is something that will help reset the world and how we live and how we work. But 2016 for me personally was the one most challenging year in my life.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so you mentioned that you had taken the quiz too, and that you were a risk taker. And, I had also mentioned about our identities as women being wrapped up. Sometimes, we transition into adulthood or into marriage, not having a full sense of our own personal financial identity. And you made that point too, because you got married at 21. And so I wanted to get your perspective on that. Given that you were married so young, you identify as a risk taker. Do you think that evolved over time, or was that always, you to the core, and how that philosophy has extended into your business and the risks that you've taken? I just wanted to hear a bit more about that, especially because you were married at such a young age and widowed twice. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
I believe, I guess because we used to ride motorcycles, I guess I was a risk taker. Really back then, but I really didn't think of it like that. And I think I was more safe. Like I would try to do things with more security in the decisions I made and so on. And I wanted to feel safe. And that's why I left my home to be married to a man, right? I thought that would make me safe, have that white picket fence, all the things that we're trained as young women to want to have, even though probably deep down, I really didn't want that. And also being entwined with his identity, it was like, you're someone's wife, right? And so Kristina, I didn't have an identity. And so when he passed, I had to refine myself. And I suppose I was taking different risks, but they were smaller, I suppose. But, losing somebody, it creates, I think, some perspective in the world. I mean, obviously I was single then. And but I didn't have my daughter at that time. So I was far more riskier with and not really in a good way, because I was doing all sorts of crazy things, to be quite frank. From, going racing and I was doing like extreme sports and things like that because I wanted to feel alive. And also, but that's not healthy either. That was too far because I didn't really feel, there was a part of me that I almost wanted to be with my husband, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
But yeah. So, and then being remarried again. But then I was starting to formulate my own identity. Like I was freelancing. I started my own business back then, even consulting and doing design and branding and all of that. And so I started to formulate my own sense of being. And then I got remarried, and then kind of the cycle sort of appeared, but I was always, because I was already exposed to having my own identity, I didn't want to lose it again. And I still feel like that's sometimes problematic, sometimes when me in relationships, but I'm very much about protecting about who I am and not losing my friends. So when I was young, I lost a lot of friends because they were his friends, not my friends. I met them through him. My friends went to the side. So I always do say it's really important to keep your world open and keep your contacts. But again, after losing my second husband, I always was trying to build security and so on because I was the sole breadwinner. But it also was just something in me. I think it's always been in me that I want to experience the world and do something different, do things that matter. And sometimes that does mean risk taking. It doesn't mean necessarily, as I said, going to the roulette table or even necessarily riding a motorcycle, at full tilt. It means maybe I'm making decisions with my career that aren't safe, quote unquote. But I think also we realized during the pandemic, I don't think jobs are always safe. You can be laid off. And when I've been laid off, it reframes how you think. And I think the biggest risk is not taking any risks because you are not really living to your potential. And it doesn't mean that you have to do something crazy. Just do small changes, something that you wouldn't do. It could be even, I don't know, going to, I would do this. I would go to a party alone and people are like, oh, you're so brave. You're going to a party alone. I'm like, well, I don't really think that's brave. But, or traveling alone. It could be in certain countries, but I have traveled to the Middle East and so on. But I think it's just about being open to experiences. And if you're feeling unfulfilled, there's, I think it's the fear of being being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And yes. I don't really, So I think that's really where I always kind of okay, I have to transform. So to transform, I always go to that story of the lobster because he's in his shell and he actually has to, I don't know if you know this, lobsters, because I love eating lobsters, but the story's quite interesting. They grow and they don't fit their shell anymore. So I don't know what they look like without their shell in the wild, but I guess They crawl under rock. They crawl under a rock and they hide, but they don't fit into their shell and they grow a new shell that fits them. But they have to be uncomfortable and break out of that shell. And then they transform into a larger lobster. And so I just thought that was really interesting. And that's really what it is. It's breaking out of your shell. And I don't know if I would consider that risk, but for me, being an entrepreneur is definitely a risk. It's not comfortable every day, believe me, but I'm glad I'm still pursuing this and I'm doing it. I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit, but I would mix it with security of often having a full-time job corporately. And I was just finding too many barriers. I couldn't be or reach what I really wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I am a risk taker, but calculated and not the typical what people think is I'm going to put all my money into this one stock, or I'm going to go gamble, or I have wanted to bungee jump, but I didn't, but bungee jump or do something that's absolutely crazy. I think risks are just personal transformation, making small changes that you're not comfortable with and expanding.
Yes, absolutely. And so, Kristina, you've made some amazing points, and I have to ask you about the corporate world because there's so many people dealing with toxic workplaces. And you mentioned that when you were widowed, I think it was the second time you experienced the lack of support from that workplace, and it was horrible. And I wanted to ask you more about that because I figured that was a means of transitioning to the business for you. And if so, can you tell us about that?
It wasn't an easy decision. So where I was working, I won't, go into too many details, but basically it involved really a change in management, and then that change of management. But they knew they'd been there during the whole thing. So they just weren't sympathetic, empathetic, or anything. And, I had a young daughter and I was working still, I'm ridiculous hours, trying to, because I knew that this change of management could make or break me having my job. And, I was being sabotaged, and I just realized it was so toxic. It was a patriarchal nepotism, and there was a lot of just toxicity in that environment. And and sadly, the cohorts that I dealt with or worked with, in my team, they were afraid for themselves as well. So I didn't have they couldn't really understand what I was going through. I don't expect them to, but I didn't feel supported. I wasn't really, I didn't really take any time off. I took 2 weeks off. That was it. And, and my poor daughter is suffering because meanwhile I'm working 60 hours a week. And, it was ridiculous. And I just thought there's more to life than this. So, I did then I took a break, and I was doing my own consulting business, and I was doing some really interesting work. But then I got lured back into the corporate world again by a different company, which is a life science company, but it was all focused on wellness. And that's how I interpreted it. And that's really was, maybe they had different, obviously, agendas, and they're a big corporation. So we weren't just aligned on like what wellness was, I suppose. And for me, again, I was in this cycle. I'm like, this is not wellness. It's not wellness for me personally anyway, because I'm back in this cycle. So when I lost my job and I already knew that I was, this wasn't for me, it was just a catalyst. And it was BlueSkys Life has been my passion project for so long. And BlueSkys is spelled with a Y. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it's spelled with a Y is not only because it's trademarkable, but because it's all about your purpose. So going back to your purpose, and I'm like, well, why am I going to this job that I can't stand? Why am I working with these people that I'm not aligned with?
Yes.
We're not, because the corporate priorities aren't aligned with my core values. So that means so much. And I think for people to feel fulfilled, I mean, entrepreneurship or sole business owners, it's not exactly easy. And I would just say, plan accordingly. Maybe it's a side hustle, but you have to feel happy. Or if you're going to change roles, change roles or change companies, make sure that your core values align with the business that you're going into. And sometimes you won't know that until you start there, but you should know corporately, at least from a high level. And I just felt it was time for me to do something that made me uncomfortable and really just, I had saved up. I saved up some money. So I had a bit of a nest egg, but it's very, very scary because you are risking your nest egg, right?
Yes, and absolutely.
Yeah. So I think it just comes down to like, I just needed to do something that spoke to my heart and my passion. And we're just in a, baby stages right now of BlueSkys Life. It's about, holistic and inclusive wellness, non-toxic products, ethical and sustainability. And, then we're going to be combining education with that. So we're still in our infancy, and it's just so important though to follow your dream, but it's not just dream it, you have to do it. So, and that's the uncomfortable part. That's where the risk is.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned that you built up a nest egg, and you're still a single mom, Kristina. So that's a big risk. I mean, I know lots of single moms start businesses every day, and it's just harder for a single mom to take that step when everything, the buck stops with you, right? And so I was looking at some of the products, look amazing. The BlueSky products, I saw lemongrass, which I absolutely adore. There's Shea products there. How did you step out to start then adding these products?
Well, because of my own health issues, not only did I have, the brain cyst, and I have high blood pressure, probably induced by my work, in the past. I only found that out during the pandemic, actually, because my health history goes on and on, but I also have extreme sensitive skin. And, and when I was investigating, all through my health journey about all the chemicals that we put into our skin, especially as women, because we use so many beauty products and fragrances and so on. This is, I'll have to find the source, but apparently we put about 515 chemicals on ours, not products, but 515 chemicals on our skin each and every day, maybe less because of COVID. Maybe people aren't putting as much makeup on these days.
Yeah.
But that was the average stat. And then there is some debate on how much of that is absorbed into your bloodstream. Some people say, or some research that said 60%, but even if it's like 30%, honestly, those toxins like parabens, phthalates, formaldehydes, PFAs, like all these things are being absorbed into your bloodstream, and they might not see them initially causing issue with your skin or your health, but they're cumulative. And due to just the extreme amount that we put on our skin and our bodies as women, I really felt that there was a need for me. And personally, I was always looking for products that would make my skin better, make me feel better. And I didn't want to have toxic products in my home or on my skin or around my daughter. I think it's about making sure it's not just about, as I said, meditating and all that. It's really making sure that you're living clean. And that's hard to do in these environments that we have with processed foods, skincare products, which aren't necessarily transparent on the labels, what's in them. So I decided to, and I had eczema, and I had some other skin conditions as well. So Shea, which is ironic because my last name is Shea, was meant to be, but shea butter is one of my favorites. So, and anything that's infused like with lavender, lemongrass, as you mentioned, is wonderful. Also, any beauty products I source and I work with the vendors. And I'm right now working on creating my own line in particular, but I want to ensure that there's ethical trade. If it is outside, for example, in the shea butter, it's sourced out of Ghana directly, and there's no pesticides, no chemicals. And it also helps a community of women there that, process and do that. And they send that over to Canada where it's manufactured here. And it's a wonderful story because the formulator, his mother had created these recipes and he's adopted them, of course. But so it has some legacy of, female entrepreneurship and care, right? And yes. I love that. And that is one of the big core values of BlueSkys Life is that I want to elevate wellness, but I also want to elevate women, whatever capacity that is. And if it's helping a community abroad and helping them, make a sustainable living, as well as a sustainable product, that's what BlueSkys Life is about. It's really non-toxic and holistic living and really about education. And that's, phase 2, because we're going to be doing a lot of education as well around. But that's really what it's about. So I really do stick to those core values. I will not, waver from non-toxic, sustainable and ethical trade as well. So it's very important for me to not only have non-toxic products, but non-toxic people in my life or a non-toxic work environment. So I think it's just rid the world of toxicity and let's all be together and let's live cleanly and get back to the planet and get back to our roots, right? Natural products.
Yes, no, absolutely. And you have a terrific story that lends itself well to that message because after being widowed twice, suffering from a brain cyst, you mentioned issues with, was it hypertension?
Yes.
Yes. And also skin issues. And you mentioned that some of those issues might also be as a result of toxic environment and whether it's at work or in our environment, what we're exposed to. And you're right. The less toxicity and the less toxic buildup we have, regardless of where it happens, is what we need. And so, Kristina, it's been amazing having you on the show. Can you tell listeners where they can find you, your website and social media?
I would love to hear from, anyone that's interested in learning more about BlueSkys Life. So you can visit www.blueskyslife.com. And to remember that BlueSkys is spelled with a Y because it's all about your why. It's about your purpose here. So, and that's intentional. So we're a purpose-led brand from our spelling, but also to our business practices. And you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. The handle again is at BlueSkys Life, and again, spelled with a Y. So I would love, if anybody's interested in sharing their products, whether we carry them or just wanting to learn more about clean beauty products or clean skincare or ethical, sustainable products, because we also carry loungewear, et cetera. But it's also just a way of life. So I would always welcome and, interest or comments. And I'd love to, even learn from others.
Okay, amazing. And once again, Kristina, it was great having you here. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight. And I would love to learn more about your story. Perhaps one day you'll be on my podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for joining us this week on Holistic Wealth with Keisha Blair. Make sure to visit our website, KeishaBlair.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or via RSS, so you will never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. Are you a member of the Institute on Holistic Wealth? If not, what are you waiting for? Go to Institute on Holistic Wealth /memberships to choose your membership plan and join. As a member, you get so many perks. Free worksheets, advice, coaching, and a member's workshop to design an intentionally designed life. You need to figure out your life purpose? Take the Build Your Life Purpose Portfolio online self-paced course. You're struggling with all your money decisions? Take the free financial identities quiz and then take the course. You recently had a breakup, job loss, or experienced the death of a loved one? Take the Holistic Healing course. You need an overall plan to achieve holistic wealth? We will help you figure out your holistic wealth blueprint. And of course, if you want to start making money by helping others achieve holistic wealth, become a certified holistic wealth consultant.
Regardless of what career you've got, the Institute will show you how to increase your income and walk in your purpose. The sooner you join, the sooner you start to achieve a more holistically wealthy lifestyle. And you're going to want to stay for a very long time. So go to instituteonholisticwealth.com/memberships to join. If you haven't read the book yet, pick up a copy of the award-winning, best-selling Holistic Wealth 32 Life Lessons to help you find purpose, prosperity, and happiness.